Get ready for the ProducTea with Leah, your fun-sized dose of business, tech, growth, and product chatter. I'm your host, Leah, and it's time to spill the tea. Top of the cold product morning, where the tea is cold and the facts are hot. Tanja, I'm so excited to have you with me today.
Thanks for having me, Leah.
How are you doing today? Can you introduce yourself to the people who are not educated yet about your academy and tell them who you are?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I'm Tanja. I'm founder of Product Academy. I'd say in a nutshell, we're trying to help product people feel a little less lonely and a little less lost when it comes to learning in the product space. So basically, we're trying to give them the insights and the community I wish I had back in the days when I stumbled into product management. And when I say we, I mean all the mentors, trainers, and coaches, the entire network that is behind Product Academy, because for sure I couldn't do it alone.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So the Product Academy is quite an interesting thing because I have a little bit of an allergy to academia in general.
Yeah.
By and large. And also we have this endless discussion usually when it's going about certificates for product managers and product leaders and so forth. Like what good are they? So they're not very good. And I usually also agree. But we met actually because you invited me on a leadership panel. And before that, we also talked a little bit.
Yeah.
I have to say, it is not about the certificates, but I really like what you are doing, specifically about how to formalize product learnings, because it's not just like completely detached from practice, which was normally my problem. And that's how we met. So it actually convinced me that I should always attach an asterisk to the question of, is academia or, like theoretical learning for product management useless? Turns out it actually isn't. And I really like what you're doing. And you have this very practical approach. And yeah, it's very clear from your success as well that the people seem to love it. Do you have any cohorts that are coming up right now that you would like to talk about? So, like, what is the deal with the stuff that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I think we're most known for the cohort-based programs that we do, mostly mentoring programs that last about 6 months usually with part-time education. So one course a month, and then in between you do your own prep work and you have your own mentor and coach. And I think that's one of the things that is different from other training providers, that you have access to someone who is able to tailor the learnings to your specific needs and to help you translate into your specific context. And so the courses that are upcoming are Level Up. That's the mentoring program for people who want to break into product or who are at the beginning of their product career. Starts again in August, and we only have 12 spots for each of the cohorts. So we work with very, very small classes because I'm really passionate about in-person learning. I don't do a lot of online trainings because we really want to also create this network of support that lasts much longer than the course itself. That's something that doesn't happen by coincidence. I'd say, like, in the beginning of Product Academy, I invested a lot of time into the content, but now I'm also like equally focused on how we deliver the learning. So at least 50% of my energy goes into all of the setup from the first time they hear from us via voice message when we bring the class together to the last time when they graduate and they get the diploma. That all the little details, they matter to us.
Yeah, they do. They do a great deal. And I'm not getting any kickback for this, right? So like, this is just like, this is my honest opinion. I think what you're doing is a great thing. But as you said, like the messaging is equally as important. I had a talk with someone yesterday that told me like, yeah, but do we need more about insert any topic, right? So like product-led growth, product-led this, product this and that. And I think, yeah, we do. If the delivery is right, and this is the problem, then it actually matters because the material is usually not the problem. It's how do you meet people where they are in their current situation and how can they bring this into their lives?
Yes.
And I guess that was also one of my big learnings before I started to also change my approach, where it was just about tactical tips versus now, okay, so tell me first what your problem is, and then I'm telling you what we can maybe do, and then also find a way that makes sense for you, because everybody is coming at a different stage in their product life.
It's a lot about listening to them before you teach back, basically. And for me, it's also a lot about bringing in the human side of everybody who is providing insights in the courses, because I'm kind of fed up with just seeing the polished version of product management out there. So what we do in class is that we bring in trainers who are still practicing product management in their day-to-day jobs. And they are willing, in this very small setting with 12 people in class, no recordings, they're willing to open up. They share like how messy things are sometimes and all the war stories. And that is what brings a ton of value, I think, because that's something that you will not find on the normal books that we read.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think that's a really good thing. So, yeah, really excited to see where this is going.
Yeah, and thanks for being a part of it.
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, you never know what's going to happen with Leia, but I'm still excited to see how successful that you can make this thing. If you choose to blow it up, even on the global stage, we never know. So let's take a step back a little bit on more on the personal side. This is a question that I ask everyone. Like, what do people get wrong about you specifically when they get to know you?
I love the question. And I think for everybody who has listened to the previous episodes, they know that this is where the introverts hang out, right? So I'm one of them, one of the people who probably other people might not think that I'm that introvert, but actually between all the talk that I give and all the workshops, I hide here in the outback of Bern. I hang out in the mountains. I need a lot of time to myself to refuel and to recharge. So that's one thing that many people don't know about me. And the second thing, I guess, is that people usually think I'm working way more than I'm actually working, because now I have a lot of support from other people who are helping with the academy, but I actually only work on an average of 12 to maybe 16 hours a week, because I have 2 little kids and I decided to work this way as long as they will still enjoy my company, which probably will not last for too long. But for now, I'm focused on spending a lot of time with my family, so I don't work that much, but I tend to decide very deliberately which kind of events I attend and which kind of programs I get myself into. And then I do those with all of my passion. But I don't work that much.
I like that very much. And also that you're so open about it, because I feel like there's still a stigma of like, how do you get all of this done, right? Like I also made a post the other day about where people just ask me all the time, like, how do you get all of this done? Well, it's not about the amount of hours, because this is what people usually also think about. It's, first of all, you need to set up your life in a way that is smart, right? In a way that, as you said, you have the help that is needed for you to get most of the annoying stuff away. And then you need to be very, very intentional about it. But I think from the personal side, I think you and me are very much alike. We crave silence. We really love to kind of create our safe space. But then while we are on camera or like while we are in person, then we are loud and we have an opinion. But what's definitely different is how much we work. I work a little bit more, but it's not a badge of honor in any way. I just feel like what you are also showing with the way that you're doing, because you get a lot of shit done, is that you can get a lot of stuff done if you're very, very intentional about it and you don't get tied up in controlling too much of the details with everything.
I guess what people don't see is how much you say no to conferences, to other podcasts, to events and other things. Like people only say the things that you say yes to, but there's a lot of things that I say no to.
No, for sure. And on the other hand, I think you can always control your flow, I think, by charging money. That was my method that definitely started to help, because I cannot attend all these talks, all these podcasts, and all the guests that apply for this podcast as well. It just does not work out anymore. So I think but like at the start of this journey, was it also for you that you felt a little bit bad when you had to say no? Was this also something that you had to deal with, or was this always easy for you?
I guess it's still hard for me, and it always was, when I have to say no to people who I really care about. So sometimes students approach me and say, like, can we have lunch? And I never have lunch with anyone, because I only have these few days in the week where I have time to have lunch by myself here. And I'm also living outside of Bern, which is not very close to where the participants usually live. I would love to have lunch with a lot of people, but it's just not feasible for me. So what I offer them sometimes, if they want to talk about things, is you can send me voice messages. I work very well with a lot of voice messages, and I do this asynchronously. Whenever I have time, I will advise them on, like, everybody has my personal phone number. Every student we ever had in the academy. That's something that we do differently too. But I will not be able to change my schedule just because a lot of people would like to have coffee or lunch. I just don't do that.
Yeah. I also had to stop doing this, and it really hurts with people that, want to be friends. And it's just like, I'm not going on random coffees. I mean, we did meet. We actually had lunch together. So I'm feeling now very special. There you go.
It was my pleasure.
I must have been important enough in that sense. But yeah, no, I think carving out that space is extremely important. And also not only just like on your personal side, but also on the professional side. Just because I'm the head of product, that does not mean that I'm going to take care of everything that has to deal with the product. It's just like you need to make sure that you really have the attention span to also work during the day on things that actually matter. And not everything is as important as people say. And that is an unfortunate truth.
Mhm.
And sometimes you make the wrong decision. That's also possible. I'm pretty sure I missed out on some really good coffees that would have advanced my career, I guess. But I value my focus time too much, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, I can very
And
much relate to that.
yeah.
And also for me, what helped me a lot set these boundaries was that prior to founding Product Academy, I really ran into a burnout full speed. I don't know if I told you that story over lunch, but I missed my own wedding, actually. I did not attend the second half of my own wedding because I collapsed, because I tried to do everything during that time. I was head of product, commuting between two cities, just had a little baby that I needed to take care of that never slept. And so I just went way beyond what was possible for me to do at a sustainable pace. And so that experience sits with me. And it's one of the first stories I tell in class, like in every class, because I think it's so real, the danger of burning out, that I think it's so important to also show what you can do to prevent this from happening.
And it really creeps up on you too.
Mm.
It's crazy sometimes how, and I would say it happens a little bit more to women than to men. Like it's just assumed that we have more bandwidth, right? Like you're a mom, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then on top of that, you also do your job. And then you have to handle up everything as well, right? There's so many crazy demands from every side. And then maybe also your family. I mean, you also know my story, right? So like from my family, there's a lot of pressure coming. Like, could you not, like just a little bit, right? And I guess there's a mixture between lack of insight from others, what it means to be a little bit more exposed or having like such a diversified life. And you just having to say that, no, this is how far I'm willing to go. And I don't apologize for it. You either accept it and you live with it or you don't, but I will not care either way. And that was very difficult for me because I'm someone that is extremely caring and I try to never disappoint people. It gives me anxiety to this day to have friends because whenever I do have friends, then I feel like there's potential to disappoint.
Yeah.
So I just choose to be a loner by and large. I have very, very little friends that I stay in contact as well because of this. But that's, like this is a side that people don't really talk about. So I really appreciate that we really share also these specific stories where you also said like you missed your wedding. I mean, it's very clear that you don't want to miss the wedding. So like how bad had it to be that this actually happened? And it was very bad, right?
Yeah.
So
but still I'm really happy it happened. After, like, in hindsight, it changed a lot for the better, because you cannot pretend it didn't happen. If you have like 80 people waiting for you, you cannot pretend that this didn't happen. So I had to face these decisions, and I think I'm much more conscious about what I do since then. And I think the Academy wouldn't have been born if it wasn't for this incident.
That's a very good point. Now, I never ran into something as drastic as this, but I definitely made my mistakes, or like, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but yeah, like, I mean, I fucked up as well, right? Like in my professional life. And if enough time passes, there is a danger, as you said, to kind of excuse it, right? So like, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I misremember it right now. And I think that there's a term for this psychologically. It's good for us to get over trauma as well. Mm-hmm. But what it also does is it kind of like your defenses are getting lowered again. And then you're in danger again to fall into these bad habits, whatever they are, whether it's a burnout, whether it's problems with yourself or whatever it is. You kind of get into this entire danger again. So what I have felt has always helped me is to have some people in my life that hold me accountable to the point of, I'm going to kick your ass if I see you expose signals like this again. Because I need this, right? Like I really need to hear it sometimes, no matter how smart I think I am, like every day it's like 1 degree a little bit more to the left, 1 degree a little bit more to the left, and then it's too much. And I just need to hear this from others as well. And I felt like that this has been helping quite a lot.
Yeah, it makes total sense. For me, it's other things like, for example, we have been working with something similar to family OKRs with my husband for years, that we do regular check-ins and we see how we're doing.
I love that.
Yeah, which areas are always red and we need to take action. And but it only matters if you really are willing to take action when something turns out to not be as you want it to be, right? But yeah, we're kind of nerds at home. We run a lot of experiments on our kids too.
Yeah, okay. That's very good. You have not been a good performer this OKR. We need to work on your growth plan. That's what every 5-year-old wants to hear, right? So
now we're experimenting with screen time and these kind of things, right? So to see like, okay, are we just afraid of opening up to more screen time because we think it's going to be bad for them? And what signals are we watching out for to see that we're still on the right track? These kind of things. we're doing at home.
I will have a product for you at some point that I cannot announce right now that you might be
Okay.
interested in testing. But yeah, maybe I have to cut this out from the podcast. Maybe not.
Okay.
But we'll see what happens. So this isn't the first time that I'm
Sounds fun.
announcing something, but we have something coming. So you're managing your entire family as like a product or like a product organization. Let's call it that, right? Like a product organization.
I prefer the term learning organization, which is
Okay.
also something that I'm very passionate about in terms of our why at Product Academy, because
Yeah.
that's another secret. I'm not that passionate about product management per se. Wow, shocker. No, I'm very interested in decision making and dealing with ambiguity and risk taking and all the things that where there's also an overlap to entrepreneurship, and like how you learn in a fast and structured way. And that goes for any system. A family is a system too, right? So
Yeah.
that's my bigger why, and product happens to be a good place to start. But I think that is also the direction that I'm being drawn into, is kind of, yeah, how can we learn in a more structured way and also while staying true to ourselves?
Yeah, I really love this. So for me, it's something similar, a bit in a way of like, it's for me, it's not how can we learn, because I feel like I figured that out for myself at least, but it's more like, how can we change behavior, which is kind of like a chicken and egg problem, because if you change your behavior, then you can learn better. But if you learn, then you also can change your behavior. I think it comes down to incentivization, as stupid as it sounds with people, because like also for myself, like if I want to lose weight, the first thing that I do is I change how much food I have at home. That's the first thing that I do. Like every health plan and diets and everything, they all deal with nutrition and what you should eat, what you should not eat. But the first thing that you should do is you should change your environment, that it's not that easy for you anymore to do specific things. So for instance, if you want to stand on your desk all day, like I'm doing right now, remove your chair, right? Make it not so easy for you to fall out of your habit. And I think this is where people struggle a lot, because they feel like, oh, if I just think about something, if I really want it enough, then I can change my behavior. Turns out that is extremely hard. But we're very good in creating systems, as you said, right, where we actually do change our behavior. And that goes through the entire organization in the end, or family in your case.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing up behavior. I think it's so fundamental. And there's one thing I've learned by being a parent that also is something that I bring into my work a lot now, is the kids, they don't copy what you say. They don't do what you say. They copy what you do, right? And the same is true for anyone also in a system like at work, right? So they don't copy what you say, they copy what you do. If you just tell them how to behave, but you behave differently as a leader, then things are not going to change, at least not as quickly as you want to, probably. So we need to be very mindful of how we act ourselves.
Yeah.
To influence behavior. So for me, that's also, for organization, that's also what kind of things do we celebrate? That's the first thing I look at when I go into organizations and do consulting. Like, what kind of behavior is rewarded? And that's tied to how we celebrate. If we only celebrate launches, right? How are we gonna move towards outcomes? If we're just like celebrating output shipping, for example.
Yeah, no, this is very true. And it gets even more funny if you just break it down to the very basics. I think one of the first meetings that I had at Duo, where I'm right now working, I had an introduction by HR, like what the values are, like what do we think is important? And one of those values was like, we're trying to be on time for meetings. I'm like, finally, an organization that is on time. Very good. The first 4 meetings that I had, people were late.
Yes.
Including C-level and so forth. So Leah just does not care. So I'm like, okay, you have these values, I'm going to enforce them. So what I do now is like, I just start at 1 minute after the meeting has started. I go with the meeting. I don't talk about it. I'm not just going to like, everybody's really sorry. Like when Leah is in the call, they're going to be on time. There's a high likelihood that they start to be on time, or they warn me beforehand, because I'm just starting. I'm just like, I don't care. Like you're late. You make everybody else wait.
I do the same in class.
It's not even about the reason. It's just like, because I am like this, they start to really think, oh, no, I don't want to be late to Leah's meeting, because then I'm going to be put on the spot. And it's kind of like a soft punishment. But yeah, I'm not sure I would be a good mom, but it's like, you never know. I would be very disciplined, I guess. But like, yeah, I don't know.
You never know before. It brings out the best and the worst.
Yeah, I don't want to try it. It's fine. I think I'm past the point. Okay. So thinking about usually this question about who is your most important mentor or source of knowledge that you had in your life, maybe also that did this kind of for you. Was there someone or something where you felt like, yeah, I can put a name on this, or like something that helped me get towards this?
It's more something than someone, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's not a person, although I wish I had certain mentors like years ago. For me, it's more the fact that I was involved in founding, co-founding, or scaling several companies. And I saw very different ways to be an entrepreneur, from bootstrapping to incubators to joint ventures and now being a solopreneur. And I learned a lot. For me, that's like an MBA, very condensed with all of the failure and all of the things that you need to learn at a very high pace. And that has shaped me a lot. Like, this entrepreneurial thinking is something that informs everything I do also at my work. And I think I couldn't have had that kind of learning curve without actually taking risks myself, like investing my own money, investing a lot of time. And I've seen also some very toxic behaviors that I do not want to implement in my life anymore, like in terms of how much we worked, how we worked, ethical values that we compromised at some point. So that also shaped me as a person a lot. And I think there's so many ways to be an entrepreneur until you find the right one that suits you and suits your life stage. And the same is true for product. There are so many ways to be a product person. And just because one does not work for you does not mean you're not a good product person, or you're not, you couldn't become one. It means that maybe you need to switch context, right? It makes a difference whether you're working in a big company, whether you're working in a startup, whether there's people you can learn from or not. All of that makes it whether people know what product management actually is or not, or they're just calling it product, right? So all of this makes a difference. And so I think sometimes people give up too early. That's what I see in class. Sometimes people are very frustrated. They feel like, nothing is working, I'm really bad at this. And then it's just because they've never seen it in a different context with different people at work, with the hats distributed to different people. Sometimes my participants are not even aware of how many hats they're wearing at the moment, just because these roles are not distributed to different people. They're just doing everything. And then they're feeling like they're failing all of the time, but they're not set up for success. Right. So for me, it's very important to also, I'm always more loyal to the participant than to the company that sends them. Psh, don't tell anyone.
I'm not telling anyone.
But the thing is, I want to see them thrive, right? So sometimes I feel like they're just not in the right environment.
I would even go further, and this is also how I manage the people that work for me. And I hope they can confirm this. If not, we're going to delete this episode. But I feel like you have to put always the people first and not the company. I think I discussed about a growth plan the other day with one of my staff PMs, where we're just like, hey, there's too much stuff in there that you think I want to hear. Where is you, right? So like, I want to see your personal interests. What are you passionate about? And sometimes there's overlap with the company, sure, of course. But like, we don't have to pretend, right? Like, in the sense. And I think what you just described is also one of the things that happens because we overestimate what other people do, what we should do, and what a failure is. I have a very narrow description of what a failure is. A failure is, for me, something where I do not learn anything.
Yes.
In the end, you have to fail so many times, and it's part of success. It's not just like a byproduct. It's just, no. In order to get somewhere where you succeed, you have to fail a couple of times. And I can put numbers on this. One of my most famous quotes in that sense is always that, look, Leah made 200 experiments in 3 years at Small PDF, and I failed 65% of them. Quantifiable hypotheses where I thought at the start, this is a good idea, let's do it. No, we're failing most of the time. And the more senior you become, the more you will fail, because this is what people also sometimes a little bit misunderstand. I'm not where I am because I succeed more. I am where I am now also because I delegate the things that are safer to do to others, so I can deal with the high risk stuff that actually also has a higher potential payoff.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many thoughts about all of this.
Go for it. But like, this is where people get it twisted sometimes.
Yeah. So first of all, the first thing that popped into my head was something that I also share with the participants a lot, is when they ask me like, oh, should I stay or should I go in the company that I'm at? I usually tell them, like, you need to have something that I call a learning backlog for yourself. Like, what are the things, the experiences that you want to expose yourself to? What are the things that you want to learn? And when there's nothing left to learn, it's time to leave. Okay, that's the first thing that I thought of. The second thing is, I teach a class on hypothesis-driven product management. It's one of my favorite topics, actually, that I talk about. And what people tell me afterwards is like, man, it's really hard to create a hypothesis. And it's getting harder. But the thing is, it's getting harder because now you understood what correlations are, what can go wrong when you set up a hypothesis in a, let's say, not so smart way. And so once you are into this outcome-driven thinking, it gets harder and harder to actually prove things, right? Prove them right. And so people sometimes get discouraged, but I think that's the right kind of hard, right? Once you understand that it's hard, you need to stay at it, just as you were saying. But the fact that it's getting harder and harder to prove things, it's because you're looking at correlation and all of these things in a more mature way, I guess.
Yeah, that's very true. And there's a full body of research on how bad we are in estimating things, right? As soon as something gets a little bit more complicated, we're really bad at predicting the future. And that's kind of what a hypothesis is. If we change this, then this will happen. Mm-hmm. And highly recommend to anyone the book Super Forecasting in this regard. It's really, really good because it shows you how bad we actually are. There's a reason behind this. There's an evolutionary reason for this. If it's all about survival, then you need to make quick decisions, and you cannot afford to be wrong in 10% of the times, whether it's a tiger that is jumping now at you out of the bushes or whether it's just a shadow that's moving a little bit too fast. Yeah. You cannot afford it. But that also means that you have an introduced bias towards certain outcomes that actually do not reflect reality at all. And this is what the thing is when we talk about product sense. This is one of my biggest gripes that I have. I think product sense is overrated, overly celebrated, and a total bullshit goal to reach for anyone. I don't have the best ideas in my life. I'm not the crazy super mastermind that people sometimes think. That's not what I do. That's not what I do. What I do as a head of product is I set up an organization so people can have their own ideas and then thrive and then explore and test them. Sometimes I have also my ideas, but I'm not going to push them just because they are mine. Because I know intrinsically that even if I'm super convinced about something, there's a big chance of it that it is wrong. And that you only know that if you actually measure it. Yes. The moment you don't, it's just like ask a salesperson how good they are in selling. 90% of them will tell you they're above average. Yeah, it's just what it is.
I know. And the thing is, you have to work with proxies sometimes because sometimes you can't measure the things that you want to measure, but you need to be aware that you're working with proxies and you need to be honest about how much you can trust these proxies, right? How much confidence you have. And so that's why I often ask people to think about, like in the entrepreneurial sense, would you be willing to fund the next feature that you're building or the next step in your product development with your own money? And what would you like to see in terms of signals in order to have confidence to put your money into this company, right? And I think these kind of little twists make a huge difference.
I started to do this in a way that I ask people whenever they commit a key result. For the next 3 months, whatever, I ask them to attach a confidence score. How sure are you that this is going to happen? And then they always start off with like 90%, 95%, 100%. And like, there's no 100%. And then you go through like, okay, so like, how likely is it that someone becomes sick, that you underestimated, overestimated, that kind of stuff and so forth. And then you can attach a score to it, right? So like, if you tell me that something is going to happen 90% likely, and I know that people are always wrong, right? So like, this is always a game in my favor. Then that means that you can only be wrong once about 10 of your predictions. And, the numbers are clear, but I don't really understand it. So we introduce scores now. I want to see how accurate you are, not whether you make it. I just want to see how accurate you are. Like if you tell me that something's going to happen 50%, is it going to happen every second time? And that's a fun exercise that is kind of also like, would you invest into this? Because then you need to think like, oh shit, there's something attached to this. Yeah. And I think that helps.
And that's also tying it back to the process of learning, right? Because for us as product people, our product are the decisions that we take. We're not the ones coding usually, right? Or like creating the products from scratch. But our product are the decisions that we take, and we need to get better at decision making. That's our job. And for that, you need to take a look at the outcomes, right? And often we don't close the learning loop in the end because we don't measure and we don't think about our decisions on a meta level afterwards.
Yeah, we don't. We just don't. We just like, I have an opinion about this person and therefore that's right. Like this product will work 100%. We should do this. Company leadership has no clue. This is so obviously wrong and everything. I love it. Every time there's something going wrong in the market, like there's a crash, everybody, like the last thing with SVB, like the big bank, Twitter was full, LinkedIn was full of people, like just everybody suddenly turns into a financial investor. So obvious, like, if you have never founded a company, you do not know how many of your decisions that you're making that are just based on a feeling again, because you don't have the time to just like evaluate everything on an Excel sheet, do due diligence, go to the bank. And like, this is like me going to UBS and then be like, can I see your financials? Because, like 3 weeks ago, nobody would have believed that the Credit Suisse will fold.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. It's like, let's not be so harsh on others all the time. Let's just assume that we're wrong. I think the world would be a better place for it.
But the fun thing is that often, ironically, we're expecting, for example, the engineers to give very exact predictions of how long it's going to take to build something. But we, in turn, are not able to forecast things so well either, right? So I think there's this discrepancy between what we expect from others and what we're able to deliver. So I think that's why it's so good to think about learning as a meta layer.
Yeah.
It helps.
No. Yeah, no, that's true. Learning, that's it. That's the only thing that counts. I would go as far, because if you learn, then success will follow anyways, because it's very hard to not succeed if you constantly learn. So, yeah. Cool. So if you think about how it used to be, maybe from your perspective in the industry, or like how it was, whether this is about product management or decision making, or like how we used to learn 10 years ago versus now, is there some trend? Is there something? Do you have any thoughts on this, how this has changed for people? Like how we did learn, how things came to be? Is there something that you would say like, yeah, that's worth highlighting?
It's a big topic. Like the more we move away from the product bubble, kind of a development or a trend that I'm currently observing quite closely, but that's from a personal point of view, is the whole unschooling movement. Because I think it's so interesting that our educational system has not changed a lot in the last couple of decades, and that we're still trying to prepare our kids for the future with curriculums that may be totally outdated by the time they come out of school. And my oldest daughter is going to start school now. And for me, it's very interesting to expose myself to the whole unschooling movement a bit with books and like talking to people, because I think that's another way of embracing uncertainty, right? Clinging to curricula makes you feel safe as a parent. Like, okay, they're going to learn all of the things that are written down, but nobody can tell you if those are the things that are going to matter at the end, right? And so for me, like unschooling, for example, is something that could be very interesting in a way to embrace uncertainty for the future, not knowing what they're going to learn, but with the goal that they will come out as wholehearted human beings who know what they like and where their talents are, which is something that most parents want for their kids, right? I'm not saying that I'm going to do this for my kids. I'm not sure, but I think it's an interesting movement that can teach us a lot about unlearning and rethinking things that we just take for granted.
Yeah. I don't think I have a very deep opinion in the sense of like children's education, but I think I can relate from my own experience that I found it very intimidating when I was 18 to choose a job, because that's usually what it is, right? Like you're coming out of school and then you kind of have to decide, what do we call it? I think we had a name for this in Switzerland. Like there's something where you go to this particular thing and then you can see what kind of jobs are good for you. This is not how reality works at all, right? Like it's not about whether you should learn welding cables or whether you should code or whatever. Like that just depends on your personality. How do you deal with people? Do you want to learn something about it? For instance, like there's a couple of topics that are always good for everyone. Being financially literate, understanding entrepreneurship. I would go as far and say like this is something that is useful for everyone. Not everybody needs to found a company in their life. I get it, but the amount of knowledge that young people have when I talk to them in one-on-one calls is far beyond what I knew about businesses 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, I was older than them. Still, and this is the crazy stuff. It's like how we learn and where we get learnings from has shifted so much, like topical expert knowledge, like how to do product management, how to do something very specific, how to do technical product management, how to learn SQL. This should not be taught in school anymore. I'm honest, really honestly thinking about it in this way. What you should learn in school is probably how to deal with conflict situations. How do you understand other people? And I know it sounds very feely and very hippie and everything, but like this is one of the problems that we have in today's industry. These interpersonal problems are creating so much friction because we don't listen to each other anymore. I really think that this is part of the problem. But yeah, academia has let me down a lot of times. except your academy, which is good. Okay. So,
Thank you. But yeah, I can relate because for me, like I studied comparative literature. I chose this because I was just in love with the world of books. I wanted to be a writer and I chose this. And sorry, I remember that actually the dean called me into his office because I had pretty good grades. I could have studied other things, right? And he called me to his office and made me explain myself, like, how dare I study comparative literature, which is like definitely not going to get me any job. And I should study economics or law or whatever, just because I had the grades to do it, right? And I didn't. And it was one of the bravest decisions I took early on in my career. Nobody would have questioned me if I said, I'm going to study economics. Nobody would have called me into their office. But I took a stand for what I wanted to do. I'm still happy that I did it. I ended up somewhere else now. I'm starting to write more again and to bridge these two worlds again. But for me, it was so important to listen to what I wanted to do. And I think sometimes people end up in jobs that have a lot to do with economics and they hate it just because they didn't know what they were good at. And luckily, the system becomes more fluid now and you can change directions. I also studied something with business administration and these kind of things at UC Berkeley after studying comparative literature. So you can change career more often and more than it was possible before, I guess. And that's a good thing. But I think we could start even earlier. I'm going to open like a bank account for my kids to play around with investing, just to see with minimum amount of money, but just to see what it's like and what effects it has to take certain decisions. And you can't start early enough with these kind of things. And nobody's going to teach you at school.
I'm 100% with you. And I think the writing topic is a very interesting one, because if you would have told me 20 years ago that I have dyslexia, right? Like for me, it's very, very difficult to read certain forms of text, or mathematical constructs are very difficult for me to understand unless I hear them and can visualize them in some way. But whatever, like I just knew always that I have this. Back then I thought I'm lazy, right? Because that's what everybody tells you. But if you would have told me that I should become an author or whatever, then I would have said, like, this is not for me, right? But what I do right now is I write more than most authors that I know. I write more than them. I write every day for like 2 to 3 hours at least. And this is on top of all the other stuff that I do also on the job and so forth. So writing is an incredibly important skill. Now, I'm not very good at it in terms of the reading comprehension and so forth, but I found my way around it and I love it. But this is the thing. It's like a skill is not necessarily tied to a job. It's not just authors that write. It's not just managers that lead. It's almost everybody that leads. Everybody's leading someone somewhere.
I love that. If I may, I'm going to suggest talking about leadership and strategy for a second, because that's another thing that I think is maybe not happening the way it's supposed to in many companies. We teach a course on leadership as well and prepare people for their first leadership position as much as you can do that in theory, right? Because of course you need to get your hands dirty. But what I see over and over again is that product strategy is something sounds so mysterious to many people because they've never been exposed to strategic thinking, because again, that happens behind closed doors. I've seen this so many times. Management goes on an offsite, they go away for a couple of days, they come back, bam, and there's the new strategy. And everyone else is missing the context, the discussions, and how they got to this point, whether it's a good strategy or not. And many people that I work with think that they're not entitled to work in a strategic way until somebody tells them, now you're head of something, go do it. And what I would love to see is for more people to own strategic thinking on their level, because strategic thinking product strategy happens on so many levels. But for some reason, we believe it's mostly reserved for the leadership, right? And I think a lot of this can happen early and you can train this muscle. And I think also leaders should be more transparent about their decision-making process to help future generations prepare for these moments where you have to take a lot of these decisions. Don't know what your take on that.
This is very true. And I think I had to get my ass kicked because I know exactly how this feels when you feel like you're not allowed to think strategically. It's not just about being allowed. It's just that you also kind of have to trust that, no, I'm going to throw an idea out there that may or may not be true, because strategic thinking inherently has a problem. It's not about certainties.
Yes.
It really isn't, because the bigger you aim, the less certainty you can actually reach, but the more you think you should reach it because there's more on the line. And I think what has happened to me is that 3 to 4 years ago, I got my ass kicked and my CPO told me, hey, look, Leah, I think you're wasting your time. I said, what are you talking about? I'm doing a great job with the product that I do. He said, like, no, you're wasting your time. You're not leveraging what you can do with your mind in here. You're wasting completely your time. Your entire work is shit. That's kind of like that was so then I cried, took it hard. It's fine. We're on good terms now, right? Like, but I also criticized the messaging there. But it was really necessary for me to just step out of this and just say, like, hey, you know what? This is actually true, because exactly what you said happened, right? It's people running around behind closed doors. They're looking very smart. They all look like they have their stuff together, because everybody tells you, like, yeah, but like we need to have a united front. We need to know what we're gonna do, and everybody's gonna follow us. This is not an episode of Lemmings where just people fall in line and then follow you. This is just not how it works anymore. And I'm glad this time is also coming to an end.
Yeah.
But in tech, like, there's only one way forward, and that is with everybody together. Because as it turns out, again, from super forecasting, again, if we take decisions together, if we look at them from different perspectives, it turns out we're actually more accurate.
So interesting, because the first company I co-founded was called Flock. It's written a bit differently, it's spelled a bit differently than the flock of birds, but it was derived from this thinking of, in flocks of birds, there's not always the same kind of bird that is leading the flock of birds into a certain direction. They change this kind of, we don't know exactly on what kind, based on what kind of system, and it's very interesting to see that they choose the bird that is most apt to lead at that point in time. And can be a mixture of how much energy they might have left and whatever it is. I don't know too much about this, but basically I love the concept of changing and putting the person into the leadership position who is most suited to lead at that very moment, right? And another thing that I wanted to add is I've been to a couple of offsites and like my fair share of offsites, management offsites. And what happens is also that often, let's say it's a weekend getaway with the entire management team, and on Monday, the entire company is expecting an update on the new strategy, right? And it's Sunday, it's 4 p.m., you have like 2 hours left, you're like tied up in all these discussions, you have no clue, and then you just have to like get something together, you don't do your best work. I've seen this so many times under pressure, because you just have to, you think you have to deliver something, instead of getting up in front of the company saying like, here are the open questions that we still haven't figured out, please help us. You think you have to deliver some half-assed strategy just because you're running out of time. And that's a pity.
Sometimes funny things happen because of this. Like, you're in a big meeting, and then I see myself as being on the same level as my peers, right? Like, I don't see myself as the head of, or that I'm just making decisions. But when I say something in these discussions, like, for instance, is this a good idea? Then I see someone already deleting it, right? I'm like, hey, whoa, take it easy, right? Like, it's not what I meant, right? So like, you have to also be sometimes careful, but with whom is delivering it and how. And that's why it's extra important. It's extra important, again, to your other point, that you demonstrate that it is okay to challenge strategy, that it is necessary, and that it's actually expected from people, not just to take stuff. And just like, it's not just a company strategy. Like, a strategy goes all the way down to how do we strategically execute a specific feature. This is not always on the product or company level. Definitely not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we just solved all problems of leadership in the last 10 minutes.
Glad to hear that.
Oh, it's good. Like, I never heard about the birds either. So I'm going to retell the story and credit you.
Thank you.
It's Tanja's story. Even you probably also heard it from someone
Not mine,
else.
but the entire team came up with it, and I love it.
It's yours now. It's fine. Okay. So maybe let's touch on one more topic in regards to living kind of good leadership style. And I would like to hear your take on this, in the sense that I made it a very specific part of myself to be extremely firm, to be extremely disciplined, but at the same time also extremely vulnerable to others. And I want to just like also define a little bit what that means, because it does not mean that I'm pouring out my heart to everyone all the time. I have a very specific, distinct border on where I go with my feelings. But what I mean with this is that if I do a mistake, if I make a mistake, then I'm very, very specific about it. And I'm also not going to hide that I'm going to be disappointed. So we had a very interesting session actually on our offsite and last time, where we talked about radical candor. And I was going in front of the entire company and I said, look, I'm very disappointed. I'm quite now a little bit, not a little bit. I always use the word little bit too much. I'm agitated right now because I spent 3 hours talking to you about something that I prepared and none of you has given me feedback. And I felt really bad. Like I was turned red and everything. And like, this made me very insecure. And this is kind of a vulnerability. Like, I felt like, was it not good? Right. And this kicked off quite a lot of feelings from others. Like, oh my God, Leah, but like, you seem always like you have your shit together. And I'm like, no, I depend like you on feedback. I love this. And I want to tell you when I feel like I did not do such a good job, because I know about 4 things of the stuff that I said that were not that good. How do you see this in your own, I don't know whether it's professional or your also personal life, but Do you also see this vulnerability to be a strength, and does it need to be
Yeah.
exposed?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can only talk about myself, but I know that I have learned this over time now, but it was not easy for me in the beginning because of also maybe feeling like an imposter often. I tried to overcompensate this with trying to seem very certain about the things that I did and not allowing myself to make a lot of mistakes while I was still doing them, of course, and I still do. But what I recognized in the last couple of years is that my professional me and my personal, very vulnerable, very feeling me were drifting apart, and many people didn't know that side of mine. And I made it my mission to bridge those two sides again, because it costs me also a lot of energy to uphold these two versions of myself that seem to be drifting apart, right? And so 2 years ago I started writing a very, very, very personal blog that also everybody's free to subscribe to, and many students are reading it, and my parents are reading it, right? And so I'm trying to be really honest about all of these feelings and to show that, because I think we don't have to hide them. Actually, it helps and gives other people permission to show their feelings too. But I think we need to learn, for example, how to give good feedback. A lot of people don't know that. That's why we also have, for example, our course Coaching Fundamentals is for product leaders to help them tap into the coaching mindset, ask better questions, provide better feedback, these kind of things. And I think we are often not specific enough when we're giving feedback. We're often also holding back our feedback or giving it at the wrong moment in time when there is nothing left to do about it, for example. And I'm very obsessed with feedback from my students. Everybody can tell you that. I'm forcing them to fill out the surveys all of the time. And I'm also getting back to them individually. And last time, for example, I gave feedback because ChatGPT is a thing now, also for us as people who are in the training space. We ask people to do a lot of homework. And suddenly I was noticing all of these answers that were like perfectly written, and they had nothing to do with the answers that I usually got from the same students. And I called it out, and I sent these people voice messages and told them, look, don't waste my time by just copy pasting stuff into your homework. Like, don't do it if you don't want to. But if you want to take up my time for a personal review, don't send me stuff that you just copy pasted. You're missing out on an opportunity. And I don't want to create this kind of pressure on you that you feel like you're so short on time that you just copy paste stuff from ChatGPT. And it took a lot of courage to tell them this, but I was very honest about it too. And I stand behind this. So yeah.
It's an incredibly difficult situation because I also don't know how to deal with it. Like I think I had someone in an interview call that was also reading off from ChatGPT. I'm not 100% sure, of course, because you never really know. But I think this is a side effect again from what we think people expect from us, right? And then it's like, yeah, we always say like, okay, you're learning for yourself and for the school, yada, yada, yada. But like people are still doing this. And I think I should not be too specific about this story now because I don't want to out anyone, but I know that some people have used ChatGPT for their employee reviews. And that is going to happen, whether we want it or not. And the only way around this is to have personal connections again, I think. And I don't know. But this is why it's so important to be vulnerable, because we should be realistic about what is expected from people and what not. And you don't have to pretend like, don't waste my time with this particular thing, because you're also frankly wasting yours. Just be honest that you could not do it or you didn't want to do it, right? Like it should become normal to say, Leah, I didn't do it. And I'm like, okay, but then I can deal with it, right?
Yeah, it's not that ChatGPT is bad, just like using a calculator. There were people decades ago telling everyone we should ban calculators from school, right? We're back now, people telling everyone we should ban ChatGPT. No, we need to, like, ChatGPT is great to train asking better questions, but like then make it your own and think about it. And that's what helps you advance your thought process and your personal growth. But just copy pasting is kind of not being mindful of other people's time. And then when I tell them, look, I have 2 little kids, I stayed up late last night to read all of your homework. This cost me like half an hour that I could have spent on my sleep or on my kids. And so when they see you as a full person with all of the things and all of the trade-offs that you need to make, then they're usually also sorry for taking up time for these things, right?
Well, unfortunately, in the future, we might not be able to see anymore whether it's being written by ChatGPT or not. So like, let's hope you and me are pensioners by that time and we don't have to deal with it anymore. But whatever it is, again, it's about reality, right? Like, so what are you really doing if you're doing this? That's just how people are. I don't know. I don't have a solution, but it's going to be interesting to see in the future. Maybe by the time we release this episode, everything has changed again. And we have ChatGPT 7 that can just cook you coffee through the PC just like by asking for it. I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe, we'll see.
Yeah, you never know. All right, we're getting to the end, Tanja, and I would like to know from you, where should people connect with you and how should they connect with you? Do you want to hear from them and how should they do it?
I definitely want to hear from them because I make it a habit to respond to every genuine message also on LinkedIn. So even if I may turn down some invitations for lunch, I will always reply as much as I can. So do reach out on LinkedIn if you want. You're also, like, as I said, if you want to know more about me from a personal humaning through life side, then you can also check out my personal blog if you want. And we run a lot of events at Product Academy where you can experience the feels like family mantra that we live by, and you can meet a lot of cool people from our tightly knit community. We're not the biggest community out there, but definitely one that where people really care about each other. So if you want to meet some other people from Product Academy, please do. And yeah, always happy to chat and to make new connections.
That sounds great. And this was not the last time we heard of you. So I hope that becomes true. And thank you very much for spending the time with me. That was very good.
Thank you, Leah. I had a lot of fun with you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the ProducTea with Leah. If you don't have enough yet, you can subscribe to my podcast right now on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can head to my website, leahtarin.com, which is leahtarin.com, where you can find much more of my material or just want to work with me.